So we have talked about this for quite a long time. Toxic fandoms and fandoms essentially getting everything they could want by just a Twitter campaign. Um, More recently, that most people know about is the Snyder Cut, which started as a Twitter trend, a hashtag of just release the Snyder Cut because Zack
Mm.
Snyder went out and said that it was a 4 hour cut or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and that movement, gained traction, and then with AT&T and Time Warner releasing HBO Max, the Snyder Cut became a big focusing point for them, and they had agreed to finish the product essentially and release it. And so we live in a world now where a fandom got a whole new film essentially.
Mhm.
So I kind of want to know your thoughts.
I guess now you can put out a product and it can be poorly received, and now you can just say, sorry, we'll do it again, and the fans sort of just get their way. And whether or not we want to make the case for whether or not that's good or bad for studios is a whole different sort of, you know, money end of things conundrum that producers and such would have to think about. But, you know, as like creators and as, casual viewers ourselves, I think it's important to kind of discuss from both sides. I think personally, the fans are getting way too much power. And I think everybody gets a platform now, and anybody can say, I don't like this. And when enough people bandwagon onto it, that's when we get things like, hey, let's release the Snyder Cut because people weren't happy with the Justice League movie we put out. And, maybe streaming service gave them the opportunity to do that, but I think in a vacuum, it's not sustainable to have, the fans just outcrying for, we didn't like it, so give us something better. And, that seemed to be, as someone who's not as invested in the tentpole superhero movies because I'm just not into that content, I look at it from the outside in and I go, are you really going to, like, are you as a studio or a director or creative going to just seek to pacify fans to keep bringing in money? And of course the answer is yes.
Right.
But at what point, and I think that's going to be the sort of overarching point that I'd like to make, whether it's we talk about the Snyder Cut or any of the other films we're going to talk about today, at what point does this whole conundrum go too far? And at what point are the fans, right? And at what points are they just wrong?
I think the Snyder Cut is a very unique example. Having not seen the Snyder Cut yet, and I know I'm way behind as a superhero fan, but having seen the original Justice League version and knowing story of post-production and production of the film itself, where Zack Snyder left during post-production of the film, and Joss Whedon, who is famous for the Avengers and Buffy and all these movies and shows, comes in and completely overhauls the movie essentially, not in the sense of reshooting scenes and restructuring the film, but tonally changing stuff. So I guess in terms of what you can tell what's his and what's Zack Snyder's in a sense, because
Sure.
following up with Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, you get this dark, gritty DC universe, and with Justice League, you don't get that. Like not even one little bit. You get a very Avengers-esque style superhero film. That lighthearted, that fun, superhero flick. And so, if you're a diehard fan of Zack Snyder, so you're looking for that gritty feel, and you didn't get that with that.
I'm of the belief that if you're going to work on something, you should see it through. And I understand he had family, whatever, going on and whatnot. And that's totally fine. But what the company should have done in the interest of saving face and avoid the whole conundrum to begin with is just delay the movie. People are still going to come and see it regardless of when it comes out. I know fans get disappointed and then they'll take to Twitter and go, well, why is the movie getting delayed? What's going on? All that, and that's a whole other PR shitstorm that starts effectively. But if you just delayed the movie until he was able to come back and work on it, because he was able to come back and work on it anyway, because, they released the cut that he wanted anyway. Here we are, 4-hour cut of the movie. I think in that sort of vein, they should have just delayed the movie then if they knew that that was going to happen, and maybe they didn't. But I, I think it's certainly interesting that fans knew what they wanted and they knew what they were going to get. You know,
See,
and a lot of them. Go ahead.
You finish.
So, if the fans sort of expected, we want the Justice League this way, shame on the studio. The studio should have come out and said, we're going to delay this movie in the interest of this is what Zack Snyder has to do to be with his family and all that stuff.
I guess in terms of like a money factor, the studio made a call that at the time probably seemed like guaranteed money, because you're bringing in a guy who did Avengers 1 and 2 and made a combined $3 billion between the two.
Sure.
And so you bring him in and you try to get that name attached and get that recognition and show a like product for an alternate universe. I think the problem is that the studio was never going to theatrically release the movie the way that it was just released on HBO Max. And I think
who was going to go see a 4-hour cut of a movie? It wasn't sustainable for them to do that. I know there are the rabid fans who will go see it, but nobody in their right mind is going to go sit in a movie theater for 4 hours.
Right, the average viewer is not going to do that. So releasing it as a 4-hour cut, or I think at one point they were releasing it as 4 1-hour episodes and it's like a show. That makes more sense feasible for this kind of product. I think when it comes to this movement and fans getting behind it, you're right when you said it's dangerous, because there are so many people out there that want certain things from certain movies, and believe me, I'm one of those people that want certain things, but being in the industry and knowing how it works, you don't get that. So this is one of those rare opportunities.
From a cash grab perspective, it was brilliant to release it on their streaming services, though. I think that is, streaming services are the future, and I think it was a good sort of way to get people to buy into your streaming service, because, if you don't have good exclusive content that's going to keep people there, then what are you doing? Get out of the streaming game. And I think that has absolutely stuff to do with it, is how can we get, why should we throw the budget around and kick the tires on making new shows when we have 4 hours of content that we can go pacify people with while we, figure out the rest of our slate for the next, 4 to 10 years or however long they're planning in advance. Especially in a pandemic, especially because, nobody's doing anything right now. Things are still shut down in a lot of places in the United States, and other countries are going back into shutdown too. So it makes sense to release that which you already have just in stockpile, because now is the time for artists to just say, I have all this stuff, let me put it out there, right? No time like the present. People are eager to just consume stuff, because people who weren't sitting on their couch all day, or people who were on it or were employed and now aren't, or people who were working from home and are doing much of like the same as the people who weren't working, there's this whole other avenue that has opened up and made streaming relevant, and I think brought it into more people's lives. And absolutely, if it made sense for a cash grab reason that way to release the Snyder Cut, then the companies did exactly what they should have done.